My name is Chad Hill. I'm a graphic designer. My company is Django Studios. I work with a lot of clients within the automotive aftermarket and the aviation industries. I do t-shirts, nose art, apparel, event design, all kinds of things, packaging, and I've been doing it for close to 30 years now. I graduated from college in 1993 with a bachelor's degree in graphic design from Ball State University, and I got a job in downtown Chicago designing packaging for different brands like Unilever and Hasbro. So I worked on brands like Trivial Pursuit, Monopoly, Jenga, Suave Kids, Dove, Degree, a lot of personal care brands, Valspar Paint, Sears Kenmore. So I did that for 19 years, and along the way I started doing some freelance work on the side for friends with car clubs and car shows and things. But I always loved airplanes and warbirds, so I always kind of checked in on that scene a little bit here and there. And one day I saw the Commemorative Air Force, Gary Austin, was redoing their B-24 into a B-24A, and just on a whim I sent him a message. I said, "Hey, I'm an artist. Do you need any help with the nose art?" And to my surprise he said yes. So I sent him sketches. He shared it with the membership and they liked it. And Gary called me and said, "We love it. Would you come down and paint it?" And I was shocked. So I said yes, and we went down there and painted it with my dad and my friend Sean and Mike to help me, because it was such a big project. And it's just kind of grown and evolved from there. After I painted the nose art on old 927, people took note of that, and I was asked to do the nose art on the Grissom Air Museum C-47 in the markings of Lieutenant Jim Haas. His airplane from the CBI, First Air Commandos, was called Do It, and it had a pin-up. So I was asked to paint that, and I did, and the family saw it and loved it. Mr. Haas saw it. About 2 weeks later he passed away, so we were all really grateful that he was able to see it and experience that and be remembered. So what I learned from the Do It project was, as a graphic designer, I studied typography and lettering and illustration styles. So as I started studying real in depth the different nose art and became obsessed with all of the painters who were painting, I started to develop the skill where I could look at a squadron and start to see different artists within the squadrons and see, this artist painted this plane and he also painted this plane, but he didn't paint this plane, just because of the styling cues and the lettering. And that's become something real important to me, is the historical authenticity of my work. So when I start a project, I'll start looking through all of the different squadrons and see the type of nose art that was done in that squadron. And if I'm asked to do a fictitious nose art, but they want it to appear that it could have been in that squadron, then I'll take that research and start developing sketches with those different styling cues, so that when it's finished, you could look at that as next to a picture of a real plane from the squadron and see that it matches. Because I want the art to be historically accurate and period correct. Even if it's not original artwork, for me, I want it to be as close to the original as I can in style. Some of my favorite projects that I've worked on, the first one would be That's All Brother, the C-47 owned by the Commemorative Air Force that was a D-Day veteran, and they were restoring that as the actual markings that it had during the war. So an interesting point about that project is they had a photo of the nose art, and they just copied that and put it on both sides while they were restoring it and touring it before they painted it. But when I started looking at the photos, I could see that on the other side, the artwork wasn't the same. To the casual person, it looked like it was the same, but it really wasn't. It was at a different rotation. The letters were slanted differently. They were at different heights. They were different width. So I wanted to be sure to be able to recreate that as close to authentic as I could. So I drew it all out, drew both sides out, and once we could see that they were in fact different, they were really surprised and happy that I noticed that. And then on the left side, the port side, they left off one of the quotation marks, so I did as well. Another favorite of mine last year was the Yankee Air Museum Speed 25 Rosie's Reply. That plane was a 340th Bomb Group veteran, but it didn't have any nose art when it was there in that group. It was only there for a couple of weeks, I believe. So they wanted to take that opportunity to create new nose art that looked period correct, but could tell not only the story of the 340th Bomb Group, but their own story being at Willow Run of the manufacturing and the Rosie the Riveter and Arsenal of Democracy. So they asked me to design a Rosie the Riveter nose art, and we came up with the name Rosie's Reply. And I based her on a real woman who was photographed working on a lathe in California in 1942 that is believed to be the inspiration for the painting of Rosie the Riveter. So I based it on her and came up with sketches, presented them. They loved them. I went to paint the airplane, and it's been flying around, and everybody seems to love it, which is great. The most recent nose art project that I did was Beach City Baby, the Vintage Wing C-53. That one also was a combat veteran, going back into its original markings. Also didn't have nose art, so they asked me to design something period correct, but there was no other kind of cues to go from the squadron, so he just asked me to create a pinup girl based on his fiancée M. So I drew her up, coming up with the lettering. I drew all the lettering by hand, sketched it out on paper, and then drew it up on the computer. I drew up the pinup on the computer after I did the sketches, because from that point on, what's unique with my process is by doing that, I already have the nose art that I can give to the operators and owners that they can use for marketing, rather than just having a painting that they have to photograph and try to strip away. I already have it in digital art. And it's a way for me to test out the colors, make sure everything's working well, get all the shapes right. And it also gives me the ability to adjust on the fly as we're putting on the aircraft, to adjust for the shape of the skin or placement. Because a lot of times what we'll do is I'll have, if there's a known photo of the plane, I'll have the owner stand on the ground where the photographer would have stood, and as we're putting it on the plane, he can compare the photo to the real thing to make sure we get it as close to accurate as possible. I've been really busy the past couple months getting ready for Oshkosh with all my various clients. All new t-shirts, new signage, new tents. Some of my clients here on Oshkosh this year, Military Aviation Museum has a tent with their P-40 and their Corsair. The Mosquitoes just got here. They're right next to another client of mine, Midwest Aero, with their BF-109 combat veteran that's all been restored and it's beautiful. I did all of the information boards for them as well as their t-shirts. Also, I did t-shirts for the Commemorative Air Force Minnesota Wing with their B-25 Miss Mitchell, the C-47 Betsy's Biscuit Bomber. I did t-shirts for them this year. The Liberty Foundation, I did shirts for Liberty Bell and Chalk 40. I also did shirts for the Seaplane Pilots Association with a VS-44 with some flying fish on Catalina Island, which was extra fun because my wife and I's first trip together 20 years ago was to Catalina Island. So that was pretty cool.
Are you the same guy who did the logo for Vintage Aviation News?
I also did. Another extra special logo that's debuting here at Oshkosh is the Vintage Aviation News logo, which was a lot of fun. We really wanted to get a logo that was evocative of the time period, that real 30s, 40s design flair with the Art Deco and the styling, and the illustration of the aircraft. And the aircraft is a C-47/DC-3, which we specifically chose to represent both sides of aviation, the warbirds and the vintage, because they're all cool. We all love the airplanes, and we all want to share each other's stories and really preserve this heritage for all of this great aviation that we all hold so dear and love. So with my company, Django Studios, it's not only vintage aviation. I do all kinds of other design too, such as corporate identity and branding. I did the 100th anniversary Snap-on Tools logo. I've worked for Breitling. I do work for Stewart Warner gauges. I do trade show design, brochures, marketing, advertising, banners, event graphics, museum graphics. I touch all kinds of work. I've got lots of t-shirts coming up once I get back home from Oshkosh to work on, some more patches, more of everything, and it's great. I love it. If you want to see more of my work, I have some t-shirts on sale on my website. I also have examples of the cowling nose arts that I do, made out of C97 cowlings that I paint up as P47 cowlings. You can go to djangostudios.com, DJANGOSTUDIOS.com, and I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn.